From APM, American Public Media.
The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. Congaree & Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field to fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpenn.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and on today's First Coast Connect, it's the biggest stories of the week. Downtown occupancy is a moving target with several major tenants in flux. Jacksonville sees a dangerous week on the roads after 3 police shootings in 4 days. Local DOGE efforts get a public hearing and draw public opposition. And the St. Augustine Airport Authority braces for a criminal investigation into board member conduct. We'll talk about all that and more with our panel of journalists on our Friday Week in Review. Later, a screening of a National Theater Live performance brings a West End theater experience to WJCT Studios. You can join the conversation. Call us on air at 904-549-2937. You can email First Coast Connect at WJCT.org, or you can reach out on social media. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The Senate is considering a government funding bill written only by Republicans. If Congress does not pass the legislation, the federal government will partially shut down at midnight. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer has astonished colleagues. He switched his position and says he will vote for the GOP bill. He says President Trump would use a shutdown to gut the federal government and fire thousands of federal workers. But NPR's Deirdre Walsh says Democratic base voters still want Democrats to block the bill.
They want Democrats on Capitol Hill to use this one moment where they actually have some leverage in the minority to fight back. But since Schumer said last night he will vote for this bill, we're already seeing some major blowback from other Democrats. All 3 top House Democratic leaders put out a statement last night saying they remain strongly opposed to the bill.
NPR's Deirdre Walsh reporting. 2 federal judges have ordered the Trump administration to reinstate thousands of probationary federal government employees. They had been fired by the Trump administration. One federal judge in California says workers were lied to when they were told they were fired for poor performance. From member station WYPR in Baltimore, Scott Massioni reports on the decision by a second federal judge in Maryland.
Federal Judge James Badar ruled that the Trump administration effectively issued a reduction in force when it fired about 23,000 probationary federal workers earlier this year. Badar granted a temporary restraining order that will reinstate those employees and block further layoffs for at least 14 days. States that sued the federal government say they were irreparably harmed by the mass layoffs because they had to provide unemployment benefits and other services to the newly fired employees. In most cases, the government must give 60 days notice of any reduction in force. In a separate case, a U.S. district judge in California halted layoffs of probationary federal workers in a decision earlier Thursday. For NPR News, I'm Scott Massioni in Baltimore.
China hosted a meeting of officials from Iran and Russia to discuss the Iranian nuclear issue. NPR's Anthony Kuhn reports from Beijing. This comes after President Trump's message to Iran last week to either negotiate or face possible military action.
A statement put out after the meeting of the 3 nations' vice foreign ministers said that the only way to resolve the Iranian nuclear issue is through diplomacy and dialogue, not sanctions and the threat of force. It added that China and Russia welcome Iran's reaffirmation that it does not seek nuclear weapons and that Iran's right to peaceful use of nuclear energy should be respected. The International Atomic Energy Agency says that Iran is close to enriching uranium that is pure enough to make nuclear weapons. Iran has rejected President Trump's call for talks, calling them coercive and not aimed at resolving real problems. Anthony Kuhn, NPR News, Beijing.
On Wall Street and pre-market trading, Dow futures are higher. This is NPR.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. A bill filed by Senator Tom Leek that provides the framework for the new Florida Museum of Black History is moving forward in the legislature. It had a unanimous thumbs up in a Senate committee this week. The bill sets a deadline to select a board of directors by July 31st and directs that board to oversee the museum in collaboration with the Foundation for the Museum of Black History and the St. Johns County Commission. It will be built in the West Augustine area, and it will be the first museum in Florida dedicated to Black history. The leaderboard at the Players' Championship is a blend of champions, 40-somethings, and experienced pros who are seeking the biggest win of their career. Lucas Glover, Camilo Villegas, and J.J. Spawn enter today's second round tied for the lead at 6 under par. Glover ended his round with 4 consecutive birdies. He expected low scores on Thursday afternoon, and they came.
It's razor thin. The margins are razor thin here, akin to, say, Augusta or Bay Hill. You get off just a little, you can make big numbers in a hurry. I happened to have a bunch of good numbers today and a bunch of good yardages and was able to be aggressive and I putted great.
Villegas shot 8 birdies for a 66 on Thursday. Meanwhile, Spawn's bogey-free play gave him his first round in the 60s at the stadium course. This afternoon, we'll see sunny skies with temperatures in the upper 70s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering their premium travel card, Venture X. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Opinions expressed on the First Coast Connect Week in Review are those of our panelists and do not reflect the views of WJCT News 89.9.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and welcome to First Coast Connect. It's Friday, which means it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. Among our topics, DOGE or no DOGE. The Jacksonville City Council hears from the public. Arrests are made in a 7-year-old's murder, and 3 officers are involved in shootings over 4 days. Shifting federal policy leaves downtown tenants unsure of their future, and airport officials in St. Augustine brace for an external investigation after refusing to conduct an internal one. To talk about all that and more, I'm joined by David Bauerlein, Metro reporter at the Florida Times-Union. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Ann.
Also by attorney and former Jacksonville City Council member Randy DeFoor. Good morning, Randy.
Good morning, Ann.
Nice to have you. We're also joined by Anthony Austin, anchor at First Coast News. Hi, Anthony.
Good morning, Ann.
And Dan Scanlan, reporter at WJCT News. Hi, Dan.
Good morning.
So I want to start, if we can, with a local effort to emulate Donald Trump's federal Department of Government Efficiency effort run by billionaire Elon Musk. It's rolled out to some mixed reviews, but Councilmember Ron Salem here in Jacksonville issued a memo saying that he wanted to explore DOGE efforts at the local level. Anthony, what is the stated goal of this effort, and generally, how is it being received?
You know, DOGE, a term that we have all become familiar with now, the Department of Government Efficiency, as you mentioned. We've heard it on the federal level with the Trump administration. We also know that Governor DeSantis is trying to emulate it here within the state of Florida, and now we're hearing about it on the local level. So as you just mentioned, Ann, a Jacksonville City Council member, Ron Salem, he's pushing for a local version of DOGE here to address potential budget deficits in the city in the coming years. And Mayor Donna Deegan and others, they're actually questioning Salem's approach, as she believes her administration is already working to improve efficiency. But something the city is facing right now when it comes to the budget, pressures due to raises for first responders and also rising costs, with projected deficits of $104 million over the next 4 years. So the mayor has been working on a jail replacement plan, potentially involving a public-private partnership. And despite differing views on efficiency, both the mayor and Salem agree on the importance of fiscal responsibility. So, of course, we have a lot of the conservative city council members saying that this is something that's needed for accountability, and they just want to make sure that the money is being spent properly within the city. I can tell you, Ann, I was actually speaking with a city council member this week who told me, listen, I understand the point, but for the city of Jacksonville, we're already stretched thin when it comes to resources and when it comes to actually getting what we need to keep the city going.
Yeah. And at this meeting, they did hear from the council auditor, David, with some proposals. She took a serious look at this idea of a local DOGE and discussed some areas that could be explored for possible savings. Can you just sort of run us through what she was discussing as places to look?
So they were looking at some social services. You'd look at grants. You would not look at public safety, evidently, because the model they're using is something that was used back in 2008. Did not look at public safety, which, as Anthony mentioned, is where really driving a lot of the increase in the budget. So it's to me, it's kind of a little bit murky at this point in terms of exactly what they're going to look at, how much they want to cut it, what exactly the end game's going to be. For me, at least, when I think of DOGE, I think of Elon Musk holding up a chainsaw, being cheered on by the conservative group. We're going to take a chainsaw to the federal government. And here in Jacksonville, that's not what this DOGE effort is. Mayor Deegan said, we don't need a chainsaw, we need a scalpel. Ron Salem saying we're not using a chainsaw. So I don't know, it's called DOGE, but is it really DOGE in terms of how we think of it in terms of big reductions in the workforce? Is it kind of finding places to trim? It could possibly mean less grants, less of this funding. As Randy well knows, there's a considerable amount of the funding in the city budget is not on city departments. It's using to support entities and organizations outside City Hall. They may look at some of those. And of course, you have to look to at how much you're borrowing, because that's a big factor too in terms of building all these streets and drainage and stadiums that everybody wants out there.
During that meeting, Councilmember City Peluso pushed back pretty strenuously on the idea of a DOGE, local DOGE. I just want to hear a little bit of what he had to say at the end of that meeting.
This meeting is a farce. It's a publicity stunt, and it's clear, and none of us are saying anything about it, but I will. Hell, it's called DOGE, right? So that was with clear intent of what you meant to do. After being on council for 6 years, there was never much this enthusiasm for quote unquote efficiency. This is a campaign event, please. And I wish you'd just say it.
So the meeting ended pretty soon after those comments with some audible protests from people in the crowd. Let's listen to that.
Keep in mind, we have 90 minutes of public comment during our council meeting. Anyone that would want to come.
Let me say one thing. Let me say one thing. Let me say one thing. Get this out now, because if it happens in the council's chambers, you will be escorted out. So go ahead and get it out now. Have at it, bud.
Thank you.
So that was Council President Randy White there at the end, issuing a warning to those people. Help us center the politics on this. How much of this is a genuine effort to find savings? How much of it is political theater, as Councilmember Jimmy Peluso was suggesting, Randy?
I think a lot of it's political theater. I mean, Jacksonville's pretty lean and mean compared to other metro cities in Florida. My concern is that it appears that Salem consistently tries to act like the mayor, which is not helpful to Jacksonville. I'm sure he's going to say I'm mean for saying that. But if you see it over and over and over again with him. And if this was really honestly an attempt to be fiscally conservative and look at what, where there's overspend. And I think one of the things the auditor said, Kim said, was, let's look at where there's been allocations for incentives that have not come to fruition, right? So monies that have been allocated but not spent. So that would be a first place you go. But if they were honestly trying to do this in the right way, they would bring in businessmen. They would, at the direction of the council, they would ask the mayor to appoint businessmen and women as a committee to look at this, and that has not happened.
And what would they bring to it that a elected official could not, or that a council auditor
Their
can't?
business. I mean, they run businesses. I mean, how about the Civic Council? Why don't you have the Civic Council look at this? In fact, I think the Civic Council has looked at this and found that, again, Jacksonville has less money than most metro cities to fund our essential services. So it has been looked at.
So you mentioned the mayor. In announcing this meeting, Ron Salem posted on X calling out Deegan for what he called financial mismanagement. But she fired back right away. She was on this program Tuesday, and she had this to say about his effort.
Yeah, it's always great to look at efficiencies. So I'd say, after 5 years on the council, welcome to the party. I'm happy to have him, taking a look. But at the end of the day, what I would say is, let's make sure that if we're going to go through what, to me, frankly, appears more performative than practical, since we're already doing a lot of things to be efficient in government, that we don't do it like a chainsaw, like things that we're seeing in the federal government right now.
So, Dan, she's saying not like a chainsaw. Ron Salem himself said this isn't a saw approach. This would be a specific approach. But I think that image of DOGE is very closely associated with a chainsaw and certainly with some unintended consequences in terms of people who've been fired and brought back, agencies that have been disrupted, leases that have been canceled. So there has been a measure of chaos attached to that acronym.
As latest hearing this morning on NPR, the 2 judges are now telling the president that he has to rehire people. This is trickle-down DOGE. We tend to forget right now that the governor himself has also instituted a DOGE department or wants to look at this. And I've talked to many Republicans who like the idea of cutting fat in the bureaucracy, but I've heard from at least one of them use a scalpel in this case. And here we are once again, the mayor and Ron Salem are butting heads now on multiple projects like the Meridian contract, where the mayor herself told me and David, who were in the room with her, that it is the administration's job to negotiate and not the city council. And then the general counsel came out and said the same thing. And now we have this negotiated settlement, which was obviously mayor and Meridian, not Meridian and city council.
We're just talking about the news of the week with our panel of journalists and media experts. If you'd like to join our conversation, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can watch our live stream. It's on Facebook or YouTube. We have a comment from Linnell on Facebook. She says, words matter. The GOP uses DOGE as they want to show alliance. And also a note from Tom on Facebook saying DOGE is unnecessary here. The city council just needs to stop their spending spree and implement realistic impact fees. A new jail, for example, is both unnecessary and unaffordable, as is a new convention center. Anthony, you alluded to the fact that this comes at a time when there are real budget challenges facing the city. Revenues are going to be less than they have been in terms of the money to spend. There's been big increases in pay raises for police and fire, a new pension plan that could possibly impact, and then things like the jail, which are, at some point is going to have to be rebuilt, apparently.
Right. Exactly. This is something that the Deegan administration is having to deal with at this time. And, she also warned, the mayor warned against across the board cuts that might harm public services, emphasizing that her approach just focuses more on voluntary reductions. The mayor mentioned that also that Salem emphasized that he wants to target specific expenses and avoid job cuts, focusing on areas that overlap in like child services and also economic development programs. The mayor has mentioned when it comes to her plan, she mentioned the 904 Lean program, which has saved significant work hours and also improved city services as well.
Yeah. David, this, dovetails with another issue because we're sort of talking about the uncertainty of DOGE. That's actually having some real world impacts downtown right now with tenants of some federal buildings or some private buildings that are occupied by federal residents. And this is something that you've been covering pretty closely. Can you kind of catch us up on the waves of information, the back and forth that we've heard?
Oh, right. Yeah. And it's really a microcosm, I think, of what communities and cities are facing all across the country, which is here in the last 2 weeks, you had an announcement that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was going to be losing its lease for space at a downtown office tower. That's 750 employees have to find a new home. Then this week, and then a week later, no, they don't have to lose their lease. So that's no longer going to have to move. Then you have the Charles E. Bennett Federal Building was on this long list of buildings that were non-core assets that might be sold by the federal government. Well, there's several large federal agencies that are in that building. And then, one day there's a list, the next day the list is gone. And maybe it's going to come back soon. It's got a coming soon sign on the website. So it's almost like waiting for a store to open at the shopping mall. It's kind of this sort of, it's really herky-jerky. It's everybody's planning for one thing one day, then the next day it's not. Obviously for downtown Jacksonville, there's been a big emphasis over the years on let's get more vibrancy, more people downtown. Part of that is having people in offices working there during the day, so they're out there going to get lunch during their lunch breaks. That would hurt downtown development to lose, a couple of thousand of employees from your downtown. So, and it's been very, I think the mayor's used the word chaotic. It's been difficult for planning. And so it seems like this is what's happening at the federal level too. And that does translate when you call something a DOGE at the local level. People are like, is this going to be like just a complete upheaval in how things are done, which is kind of what's happening at the federal level.
I'm going to take a call from Linda. Good morning, Linda. Go ahead.
Good morning. I was under the mistaken impression that Jacksonville had a strong mayor form of government. And if that is truly the case, I think reporters, the next time Mr. Salem has one of these issues he brings, somebody needs to ask him, is he doing this? Is he planning to run for mayor? Because to have a co-mayor who is, and it is his right as a city council person, but, he constantly, when I see him, a headline with his name, I know it's something that's counter to something that's going on. If he thinks that there's fat in the government, guess what? He's been on council for 5 years. The fat probably got there when he was on there passing budgets. So for him to come out and just throw out that there's fat, not have the police or the stadium deal that we're going into debt to do, then you're talking about entitlements, quote unquote. They should be talking about if they actually go through with the federal budget that they're trying to pass, which they're going to cut Medicaid, he needs to be talking about what is going to be the backfill, or is he actually talking about doing additional cuts to the poor people since he doesn't think they're his constituents? I just need for somebody to ask him, does he believe in the strong mayor form of government? And if so, he needs to work with the mayor or fall back, because he's really up in front of her every time I turn around.
Thanks, Linda. I mean, just because it's a strong form of mayor doesn't mean, as a city council member, you're certainly allowed to speak out and challenge the mayor. But it is clear that he's at least pondering the idea of a run. I mean, I've asked him about it, and his response is just sort of like, I really like public service.
The rumor is that he is going to run, and clearly his actions are showing that seems to be the case. Yes, it is a strong mayor form of government. And as a city council person, when I was on council, I did ask the hard questions of the administration. That is part of our responsibility to, and protecting our constituents and doing what's best for them.
Is there any risk that you see right now? DOGE is popular with a lot of people. It's less popular with other people, but it's still early in terms of what the final analysis will be of this approach to reducing the size of government. Is it risky at all for someone to kind of attach their effort to that name, to that moniker, not knowing how it will be viewed in a couple of years?
What the result will be? That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think that it's just so different at the federal level than it is the local level. I mean, the federal level, there is a significant amount of fat at the federal level. I mean, I think under the Biden administration, there was an increase, I think it was like 30% staff increase at the federal level of jobs. So, we just don't have that here in Jacksonville. I mean, we are really we know we are bone thin on the budget, in my opinion, and I think the auditor said it straight. I mean, if you're going to look at where to cut, it's the allocations of incentives that have either timed out or or for whatever reason still on the books.
Yeah. Got a call from Marvin on the west side. Good morning, Marvin. Go ahead.
Good morning. I just wanted to remind everyone that the only reason that we have 19 city council people is for political reasons, not because of any kind of efficiency purposes. And if you want to start saving money, cut that 19-member council down to about 7, and you can save a ton of money. And if they want to do some good DOGE work and save some conservative dollars, you could talk about staff and space in City Hall. And we don't have as many people running around trying to figure out what kind of jobs they're going to advance to next. And they could do their job for the citizens. There are too many people, and they have no useful purpose for the citizens of this city.
Thanks, Marvin. I know that is a proposal that Rory Diamond, city council member, has actually made himself. We could go down to 7 members. I'm going to start with you, Randy. Obviously, 19 is a sometimes unwieldy number of legislators. Do they consume a lot of resources, though? I mean, would there be
No,
savings?
I mean, you got to remember they're only paid part-time. So, I mean, you're probably talking $1 million you'd save.
Out of $1 billion budget.
Right. I mean, I think where I would cut, if you're going to cut a city council person, it would be the ones that don't represent a certain area, that are, you have, 5, I should know this, at large. And they don't really, forgive me, but they aren't doing the hard work. I mean, and when you are representing an area, you're getting thousands of calls. I mean, I was actively in touch with my people daily. The at-large people don't have that.
Interesting.
Because, they're at large. So if I were going to cut, that's where I would cut.
And the district council members, many of them were community leaders, even Ron Salem, for 30, 40 years, were in the community and worked their way up. So they know the issues, and they are familiar to people who have a complaint, and they know they've got someone to listen.
Ron is at large.
Well.
Well, I think one point to be made, too, is you can save some money maybe by slimming down the size of city council. But on the big picture things, the big ticket stuff, city council and the mayor agreed on $775 million for a new stadium. They've agreed really now on we're going to build a new $1 billion jail, huge expense there. They agreed on historic increases in pay for police and firefighters, which is a big driver of the budget. And now there's a lot of let's sort of do stuff at the margins and try and show that we're more fiscally conservative than the other. But the big drivers of the budget, there's agreement on. And so the question is, what impact does that have on the next budget? Do you say, well, now we got to raise the property tax rates to be able to do all this stuff and also not have everyday services like libraries and parks and drainage and streets suffer? I think that's really unknown at this point, whether they get to that point. Or do you say, look, we've agreed to these really big ticket stuff and there's a price to pay for that. And that is you're going to have to cut some other services. And since you all agreed on that, you all knew what the tax rate is, that's what's going to happen. And that's kind of what this DOGE effort might be looking at.
Got a call from John on the south side. Good morning, John. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. With the discussion of the budget and how tight things are and potential DOGE sorts of activities, I'm wondering, we've recently heard that the jail is back on the table as far as replacing it, and whether that's a public or public-private partnership or not, that's $1 billion. There's been no real discussion since the UF campus announcement in December that they've got 5 years that they won't be able to tear down the Prime Osborne. Of course, they're leaving the historic portion in the front, but the study that the council did last year was suggesting that was going to be over $1 billion. This is money that $2 billion between the jail and the convention center, and potentially putting the convention center where the jail is. That's what Boyer is wanting to do at DIA. When are we going to start talking about this $2 billion of additional expenditures and where that's coming from?
Yeah, and that doesn't include the stadium, obviously, as you noted. So a lot of big expenses coming down the pike. I want to move on now to a different headline from this week, Dan, that you covered on multiple fronts. First of all, it was a week that JSO dubbed a rough couple of days. There were 3 police shootings in 4 days. In 2 cases, people were alleged to have shot at police before anybody shot at them. And in one case, an off-duty officer was shot at a truck driver for reasons that are not clear. I just want to start by hearing a little bit of the sheriff. He was speaking about this incident that occurred near Trout River and Rebald Avenue, one of the shootings that someone shot at an officer first.
This guy had a bulletproof vest. He had bad intentions. This guy had a drum magazine inside that rifle. He had bad intentions. He had another pistol on the seat of his car. So I don't know what he was going to do. I don't know what his plans were. But apparently, and thankfully, our officer was able to stop him and stop him from doing something to someone else. It appears to me that he was on his way to do something to someone else.
Dan.
That is scary that he's got a bulletproof vest. What happened was this was a normal traffic stop, or apparently there was some traffic deployment going on up there. The officer tried to stop this guy. He continued, pulled in a driveway, opens the door. Officer says, "Stay put," and then the gunfire is fired by him first, unknown which of the 2 weapons he used, and then the officer fired, and it ultimately was fatal to the guy in the car.
And the officer was also struck.
He was struck in the foot, thankfully for him. But then we've got the Tuesday incident where a lady apparently was trying to commit suicide in her garage. Husband confronts her. She points a gun at him. He goes and calls 911. She crosses the street to a bench. And then from there, as officers approach, she starts shooting. This is Tuesday night, 11 o'clock. And then the officers, 6 of them respond. She was in critical condition. And then Monday, the one that's most puzzling, there's quote-unquote contact between a off-duty lieutenant coming back home from work and a truck driver, 70 years old, heading south. And ultimately, they stop around San Marco area and the fountain there at Atlantic, and the lieutenant puts shots into the engine of the truck. No further information. Was this road rage? Did the truck driver do something? Did the lieutenant do something? But 3 of these in the space of 3 days, 4 for the year total. We did not have any officer-involved shootings up to this point, and the lieutenant, this was his 4th officer-involved shooting. So some interesting investigation on that one, at least. I think the one on Wednesday somewhat sealed shut that this guy could have been en route to something pretty nasty with the weaponry, because a snail drum has got 100 or 200 shots in it. That rifle could have been used for a lot of damage wherever he was headed.
That was what was on the weapon at the time?
That was in the vehicle of the gentleman who died on Wednesday after the traffic cop confrontation.
So obviously some, as they say, a difficult week, Anthony, for officers. This incident with the officer shooting into a truck, though, he was not wearing body cam. Lieutenants don't wear body cameras, and he was off duty. But there may be some footage from this truck, the dash cam of the truck driver. They were, I guess, having a little difficulty downloading, but might provide some answers as to what happened during that rush hour encounter.
Right. I was just discussing this particular incident with someone last night because it's a very unusual situation. We are not receiving a lot of information about exactly what happened there. And I'm kind of wondering, what is the reason behind that? All we know is something happened, and we were just told by JSO that this lieutenant made contact with this truck driver. I understand the truck driver, he's 70 years old. They said that he was cooperating with police, but they just said the lieutenant made contact with him. He fired those shots into the truck, and that's all we know. We have not received any more information. So we need to see some type of video to know what was happening here, what led to this dispute.
Yeah, what is interesting, I mean, really kind of shocking, I think, David, is that this incident where the truck was shot by the officers is happening in rush hour traffic on I-95 in the, there was a backup of some kind. We understand that there may have been contact multiple contact between these two vehicles before the shooting. But that really sounds like something out of a movie where you have, in the middle of a rush hour incident, they got tons of 911 calls from people reporting it. It sounds really scary.
Well, definitely. I mean, and I agree with Anthony. It's really a lot of missing pieces there in terms of what led up to it, what caused it. Ultimately, the standard I think would be if you or I or somebody else did those actions, did that or did that not create any kind of criminal violation? I just don't know enough about it really to be able to comment too much on it, other than it just seems it feels like that would have been dangerous to a lot of other people on that highway at the same time. And we don't know yet what motivated the officer to fire into the truck. And that's a big question that has not been answered. But yeah, I mean, you're driving down the road and you see all this happen. I mean, just on the face of it, you go, it feels like there's some sort of weird road rage incident happening. That may not be what it was. I don't know. I mean, what really motivated it? What was his reasons for firing into the truck? That's a big question still that has not been answered.
I mean, we do know that the driver of the truck was not placed under arrest. He was being compliant. Officers said there were no charges pending. So to the extent that there was any initiating event, they haven't yet placed any blame on him for the incident. But, overall, Randy, we're seeing a big decline in, the number of homicides by double digits this year in Jacksonville. So there has been, while this sort of feels like a wild week, it really has, the trend has been promising.
Definitely. And I think I attribute that to everyone working together, from Melissa Nelson to the sheriff, TK Waters. They've all been working towards reducing the murder numbers and really taking on the gangs. I mean, they've done a great job. Just going back to the cop shooting, I have a couple of family members who are in law enforcement. And the thing that came to mind as I heard the story was that it sounded like the officer I think he's been an officer for 21 years. He had 4 previous shootings. It almost sounded like he got triggered, like a PTSD event. I'm not sure. And that may be why they're keeping it quiet.
This is the truck incident.
Yeah, the truck incident.
Yeah. Well, I do want to just talk a little bit, Dan Scanlan, about another story that you covered. This was some arrests made in a really high-profile and tragic murder of a 7-year-old named Breon Allen. The child was killed in January, and the sheriff announced some arrests in that case finally this month.
Yes, young Mr. Allen and a family member were walking outside of a house on Commonwealth Avenue when a group of men jumped out of a vehicle and started pumping the bullets, and unfortunately, the little boy was killed at that point. The sheriff took a while to announce this. We've had arrests of 4 people that he called legitimate gang members over the space of about a month. When the last one got in jail, he announced it, and he said he has more arrests coming. The point that got to me was he said the gunman, at least one gunman, could see the little boy, and they continued firing the guns. And this just amazes me. This little boy was a football star at his young age. His mom loved him and said, and I think he probably would have gone on to be something pretty cool in this community. So that hurts me as a grandfather and father. But the fact is that this is one of a increasing number, in my opinion, of gang versus gang shootings that we've had in the past year that seems to be driving some of our homicide rate. And while it's been quiet, we have had some obvious retribution shootings in the past few months in the city. So maybe obviously the gang group that the sheriff was part of when he was a lieutenant is working. They're working with the gang members, trying to convince them to stop doing this stuff, but it's still happening.
Anthony, I think what is measure of the violence in this community and a consistent is that pretty much all of the homicides of young people, with an occasional exception of like a child abuse case, have been the results of a gang war incident, where they're caught in the crossfire. And there have been so many in recent years. And always it is mourned by the community, but it doesn't necessarily diminish when it's happening. I mean, one of the people arrested in this case was himself very young, just 18 years old.
Right. And this is something, if I can just take a moment, that affects me on a personal level. I've lost family members due to gang violence. From where I'm from in the state of Texas, I had a cousin who was shot and killed at a very young age in the garage of my aunt and uncle's home by gang members and was just left there to die. They weren't home at the time. So I know the impact from a family that gang violence has on those who have been taken and how it can affect the community. In Jacksonville, I believe there's about 32 documented gangs right now. And I saw the video from Breon Allen's death from a neighbor's home camera. And you can hear the gunshots. You see the little boy walking. And then he goes out of frame and you can just hear gunshot after gunshot after gunshot. And you see people pull up on the scene and you can see the response. They're saying, this is just a little boy that's been shot. And how can someone do that? Why do we have this gang violence? Like I mentioned, there's 32 documented gangs within the city. Community advocates that we spoke with, they believe, since we saw these 4 men who were arrested for the deaths, they actually believe that the sheriff's office and others are doing their part to try to take these gang members off the streets and do something to fix this problem. But it's going to continue to take a lot of resources to get these gang members off the streets and to stop this from happening. I think the sheriff's office, they did post a video of actually showing the men who were arrested being walked into the jail. They have their faces there, them shackled. I think it was making a strong statement of what they're trying to do to get these gang members off the streets.
Yeah, but to your point, the trauma remains. I mean,
the trauma still remains. Yeah.
Well, if you're just joining us, we are talking about the week's biggest headlines with our panel of media experts. We're talking to Dan Scanlan, Randy DeFoor, Anthony Austin, and David Bauerlein. If you'd like to join the conversation, give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. I want to take a call, if we can, from AJ in Arlington. AJ, hello. I think we heard from you earlier in this week, but welcome back.
Thank you for taking the call again. I just want, this is AJ from Mad Dash, and I just want to acknowledge our community. While the sheriff and the state attorney's office are doing amazing jobs, it's also our community making phone calls. I mean, Mad Dash getting phone calls, and we're able to turn that information over to our city officials. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge our community because they're doing a heck of a job helping bring this crime down in our city.
AJ, you're a little muffled right now. I'm not sure if you can kind of adjust your phone, but are you saying that community members were instrumental in these arrests that were announced this week?
Yes, yes. It was very instrumental. Mad Dads took several phone calls. Crime Stoppers took phone calls. So I just want to make sure that our community is acknowledged because they're doing an amazing job in helping to bring down the crime along with the state attorney and the sheriff's department. So I just want to make sure that they acknowledge for all the hard work that they're doing to help.
All right. Thanks, AJ, with Mad Dads. Appreciate your call. I want to move on now to a topic from St. Johns County. This is the Airport Authority down in right north of St. Augustine. It's a topic that we first discussed a couple weeks ago, but it is continuing to sort of grow and change by the week. The conduct of airport officials is at question. David Bauerlein, basically a couple weeks ago, their general counsel, the attorney that represents this board, quit, saying, I can't represent these people. They're violating the Sunshine Law.
Right. And then it looks like it's going to be an investigation by the state attorney is what the expectation would be. Certainly you would expect that would happen when these kind of accusations been raised to this level. Then there was an attempt to do an internal investigation, and that deadlocked on a 2-2 vote by the board. So there's a real split there with one board member saying it's just rumors, the other person saying, no, at this point, you actually have something in specific in writing by your former attorney saying, I cannot represent you anymore because of the concerns I have about violations of the Sunshine Law. So it's not a huge airport, but it's an important airport. I mean, it obviously serves a market, and it's been growing over the years. And so I assume there's going to be a state attorney investigation to figure out just what exactly happened and were there violations of the Sunshine Law.
Dan, this was a 2-2 vote not to conduct an internal investigation, as David mentioned. One of the people voting against the internal investigation was a board member who would have been subject to that investigation. Some people saying that seems to be a bit of a conflict.
Well, she and Mr. Ludlow are the two that apparently have been talking, and
we should say Reba Ludlow is the board chair, and then board member Len Tucker they're both
Right.
accused of these violations.
They've been apparent that there's some claim that they've been talking off the record on violating Florida Sunshine Law about certain things. She was contacted by our reporter, and she indicated she would. Tucker said he would not comment on the matter, but she has indicated that she is well aware of the state's laws prohibiting elected members, and she about discussing matters in private. And she's also said she's been there since 1985. But the board, the Aviation Authority's attorney, Chad Roberts, says based on the seriousness and gravity of the issues, it would be highly unusual if there were not a criminal investigation. And there's even some rumor that it may have started already. So they're under investigation for talking when they shouldn't. And if a Jacksonville City Council member was holding a shade meeting over something with a friend over some barbecue, you'd be sure that there'd be an investigation immediately. So the thing is, it's a very busy airport. It has occasionally had some actual operating, commercial airlines in there, but there's danger of losing any of that if this turns out to be a criminal investigation.
Sure. I'm going to ask you as an attorney, Randy, first of all, how unusual is it for an attorney to sort of weigh in on the record
Very
with concerns?
unusual.
Yeah.
Because he has an ethical obligation to his client. So
And
I
who
thought
is his client? Is it the board? Is it the community?
it would be the board.
Okay.
So I thought that was very interesting. And also, if there was sunshine violations, then it would void all the decisions they've been made by the board.
Yeah, talk to us about the penalties of violating a sunshine law, which is basically two members of the same body meeting out of a public setting without noticing the
Correct.
meeting. Yeah.
And talking about issues that they're going to vote on. Remember, that's key.
Business before the
Because
board.
remember, we had this issue with JEA recently, and it turned out that they were not discussing any issue that they would be voting on. So that's important to.
Because you can get together if you're just talking socially.
Correct.
Okay.
But so there are a couple of things. One, it is I believe it's a felony.
Well, so I was looking at that. I guess that there's a couple of levels. Intentional violations can be a second degree misdemeanor, but you can get jail time of up to 60 days. And if it's not intentional, you can just be fined up to $500.
Then I'm incorrect about it. So I remember, we took it very seriously on council because there had been in the past, it had been taken to the state attorney's office. Nobody wants that.
Yeah. And you're required to get some annual training, aren't you?
Yeah, every year training.
Everybody in Florida that's an elected official.
That's right.
Yeah. So, Anthony, this, is an airport that has expressed some interest in expanding. But one of the two that's accused of this, the board chair, Reba Ludlow, has been on the board since 1985. The potential that decisions could be voided, which is one of the penalties of a violation of the Sunshine Law, seems like that could have some rather sweeping impacts.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And I remember we were contacted about the situation that was happening at that airport. I want to say it might have been more than a year ago. Someone reached out to us with concerns about what was happening with this airport and the board. And their concerns were that this airport would not grow and that kind of some of the back and forth that was going on with this board, it was going to stop other airlines from coming in, and they were just going to basically lead to the decline of this airport. And like you mentioned, the lawyer said that there's been a pattern of violations and ethical conflicts that have been going on for a while. So you mentioned that this particular board member has been there since 1985.
Yeah.
I wasn't born in 1985. I'm just going to be honest with you. And that tells you how long.
Yeah, we can see the gray hair.
Right, exactly. And I'm getting closer to 40 soon, so that tells you just how long she's been serving on this board. But it just kind of makes you wonder what checks and balances are happening here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Also, just another attorney question for you, Randy. But they, their general counsel quit in this very public way. They still have an aviation attorney that is sitting in these meetings. They handle the the FAA, the compliance, the aviation side, but they're really sitting without anybody to guide them on how do I handle the potential that the state attorney's office is going to come knocking on my door, that I'm going to get a subpoena. There's nobody to really advise them on what could happen.
Well, at this point, as their attorney, I would advise them to get their own attorney.
Yeah, and I think he did advise the executive director, the interim executive director, to get his own attorney.
Mr. Tucker apparently has stated that he's not talking due to advice of his attorney. So at least he's publicly stated he has one. Don't forget, talk about DOGE, the Grumman facility there. Apparently one office that they contain is on the cutting block for DOGE to lose employees. So that entire complex is going to lose some portion of their human employed traffic, which would possibly impact the airport traffic. Who knows?
There has been a lot of tumult at that agency, not necessarily the board, David, but they've gone through this cycle of executive director, interim executive director, another interim executive director. And so there has been this, I don't know, little blight on its reputation as it looks to, perhaps grow and get more flights.
Well, I'm sure if you're an airline, that's something you look at is the history, the track record, stability. Any business would want that. It has had some airlines come in and leave. There's some always churn in the airline industry. I don't know how much of that's necessarily that, but you look at the location and it's well located. It's close to St. Augustine, which is a big tourist hotspot. Obviously, you have a lot of wealth in Ponte Vedra, people who fly private jets. So it feels like an airport that should be growing in leaps and bounds. Evidently, what Anthony's saying, that real concerns whether that is or can be the case.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. David Bauerlein, Randy DeFoor, Anthony Austin, Dan Scanlan, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Ann.
All right, coming up, a screening of a National Theater live performance at WJCT Studios.
The Players' Championship returns to TPC Sawgrass March 11th through 16th. Watch the PGA Tour's top players and enjoy local bites at the stadium course in Ponte Vedra Beach. More info and tickets at theplayers.com. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. One texter call can wreck it all. Learn more through distracted driving presentations for teens and the workforce. Arrive alive. Let's end distracted driving.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
Now more than ever, trustworthy news matters. At WJCT News 89.9, we bring you the facts, clear, accurate, and in-depth. From breaking stories to investigative reporting, we keep you informed because an informed community is a strong community. Independent journalism depends on you. Your support keeps fact-based news free and accessible for everyone. Now more than ever, your contribution makes a difference. Make your gift today at wjct.org/radio and stand with WJCT News 89.9.
This week on Science Friday, to celebrate Pi Day, we invited mathematician Stephen Strogatz to break your brain.
Our world is filled with periodic, repetitive behavior, and as soon as you try to describe any of that with math, pi is going to pop up.
That's on Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
This afternoon at 3, here on WJCT News 89.9.
The president's refusal to rule out a recession puts Republicans in an awkward position, but Democrats are in a tight spot too.
I've gone back and forth on this thing 3 times because it is 2 horrible choices.
On the roundup this week, the scramble to avert a government shutdown, the fight over the right to protest, and the decision to turn the White House lawn into a showroom for Teslas. Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, seeing an award-winning London stage performance usually requires some costs, among them airfare, hotel, and a ticket price. But in this local showing of a National Theater production, it's going to be considerably more affordable. It doesn't require any travel. Here to tell us about it and the upcoming screening of The Motive and the Cue is Cersei Lenoble, WJCT's Grants and Education Outreach Manager. Hi, Cersei.
Hi, Ann.
Nice to have you. We're also joined by David Luckin, host of the Electro Lounge and basic guru of all things WJCT.
I try.
What inspired you, the public media in general here, to bring The Motive and the Cue to the studios?
Well, it first started, of course, with David Luckin's love of film. And unfortunately, the closing of the San Marco Theater and Sunray Cinemas, we have a wonderful space, a huge psych wall, and a great projector. So we have the ability to show films. And we started with some documentaries and November show, and we just wanted to expand. And I have seen NT Live productions, and so has David McGowan. He's actually luckily been to the National Theater to see them live, but I was aware of this, and we were excited to explore this possibility.
So for people who don't know about NT Live, tell us what it is. I mean, obviously the National Theater has a worldwide reputation just as an incredible performance, the quality of it. What's the live element, and what are people going to be seeing here?
People are going to be seeing here the stage production. They have multiple cameras. They record it in front of a live audience. You're actually going to see the play better than you would if you were actually at the Playhouse. You'll be closer with different angles. And
there are no bad seats.
Yeah, no bad seats.
No bad seats.
It's a great opportunity to see international theater here in your own hometown.
And the film itself, David, The Motive in the Queue, it is basically a show that is about an actual performance of Hamlet in 1964. Tell us a little bit about, who was involved in that Broadway production.
John Gielgud, the director and famous actor, and Richard Burton, the actor. And I don't know enough to fill in all those blanks you just asked me.
Okay.
But it is, no, Cersei, take over.
It is a filming of the rehearsal process
of this production
of Hamlet, and the audience will recognize the director of the play is Sam Mendez, and Mark,
who directed the movie American Beauty, among other things, yeah,
and won an Oscar for that. And Mark Gatiss, who audiences will recognize as Mycroft Holmes in the BBC and PBS production of Sherlock. He plays John Gielgud. And so, it's really a two eras of theater are meeting and kind of clashing. So Gielgud is the old school. He was a contemporary of Laurence Olivier, and then
Richard Burton.
Richard Burton
rather
is
volatile.
Very volatile, and Elizabeth Taylor's also in this play, and so they're going through the rehearsal process.
Yeah. David, what is your vision on this? I mean, this is as she said, part of a series. We're trying to fill a vacuum that was left when a couple of really important local theaters closed.
We'd really like to show all kinds of films, documentaries, classic films, music concert films, and mostly because Sunray went away, we really want to fill that void. We've shown 3 music documentaries, 2 science documentaries. We're now going to show National Theater Live. We're going to do Jaws and 4th of July. We've got a plan for Bringing Up Baby. We're going to do a lunch and laugh with Dr. Joe Servin. We always tell you about all the horrible diseases there are. Well, we're going to tell you the power of laughter and how that can make you feel so much better. And Joe, he'll be great for that. He wants to do it. And it's a classic film with Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant and The Leopard. And so we don't have any walls on this. It's not going to be old. It's not going to be all new. It's not going to be all documentaries. It's whatever we think needs to be shown in this town hasn't made the town. I know next year for sure we are really going to try and do the Oscar shorts. We were a little late this year with the whole process, so we didn't get to do it. But I went to Sunray for that. You know how fun that is, where you just sit there and watch 8 Oscar-nominated shorts. So we don't have any limits on this. We just want to show good film and build a nice following. And so far, we feel like we've done really well.
Are you taking suggestions from the community?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
we have a questionnaire, and people are saying show Hitchcock and show docs. We're getting, that's what we want. We want to show films that people want to see. Whether they're old or new isn't really matter as much as that we're showing interesting films that people want to come out for.
And Cersei, I saw that David McGowan, the president of WJCT Public Media, was saying that this could be the first of a series of these types of productions. And we know that National Theater Live has got some other really cool shows in the queue. Do you think that we might be getting more of these?
I certainly hope so. I've got my fingers crossed for a fall showing of Dr. Strangelove with Stephen Coogan. But I'd watch anything. They've got The Importance of Being Earnest. I've seen One Man, Two Governors with James Corden.
I've got my fingers crossed for Vanya and for Fleabag. So.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. This is actually going to be staged next.
It's on Wednesday.
And it's $10.
It's $10.
So incredibly affordable.
Yep. And you can visit wjct.org/film to see what's coming up and to get your tickets for the screening.
All right. Well, thanks for talking with us about it. Cersei Noble, David Luckin, and just in the minute that we've got left, just encourage you all to pledge if you are able. We are at the tail end of this pledge drive.
We're going to wrap this up this weekend. We'll still be pledging during Wait, Don't Tell Me, but we need your phone call right now at 353-9528 to get us over the hump here. We're almost there with our goals, but we need your help. So please call us, and thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. I'm Ann Schindler. See you Monday.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. DuPont Counseling Group is a team of therapists, psychiatrists, and counselors available to help with life's mental health challenges. Everyone needs help sometimes. More information can be found at jacksonvillecounseling.org.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Transition from becoming a listener to a listener supporter. Call 353-9528 or go to WJCT.org and pledge. Thanks.
Democrats are on the cusp of voting to avoid a shutdown. They say the consequences of standing up to the Trump administration could be much, much worse. From WAMU and NPR in Washington, this is 1A.